January 17th, 1991, Baghdad, Iraq, 2:38 a.m. The city went dark in a yellow haze of sodium lamps and oil smoke. Then the hum of the generator died. Silence. Deep beneath Al Azamiya, General Maher Abd al-Rashid peered at the jittery radar screen. Every console glowed, every gauge seemed alive, but the sky was empty because the technician muttered, "It's a system failure." However, the response was, "It can't be all clear," but it was. For the first time in modern warfare, an entire capital had gone blind. Consequently, 30 miles out, at 22,000 feet, black-winged silhouettes slid undetected across the Tigris, F-117 Nighthawks, from the 415 Tactical Fighter Squadron, so secret that most pilots on base had never laid eyes on them, were seconds away from dropping the first bombs of Operation Desert Storm. Each jet was loaded with two 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs destined for air defense command posts, radar sites, and telephone exchanges. Meanwhile, in the bunkers, officers leaned over green screens, tapping, smacking, shouting in Arabic, while on the surface, anti-aircraft gunners waited for orders that never came. At 2:38 a.m., the first blast ripped through the Ministry of Communications. A shockwave rolled over the city. Baghdad flashed white, as if lightning had struck the desert. Then another blast occurred, and another. Each detonation was perfectly timed, silent until impact. Therefore, within 7 minutes, Iraq's integrated air defense network, the fourth largest on the planet, was blind. What Saddam's generals did not yet know was that the enemy had been above them all the time, invisible to every radar they had trusted. At 2:45 a.m., the Baghdad Air Defense Operations Center was beginning to come unglued, and screens were blinking off and lights were dying, as a young officer was shouting into a phone that both of the Soviet-made tracking stations at Taji and Habaniya were off the air, not just damaged, not jammed, but off the air, down. Down in the bunker beneath, General Rashid and his Soviet advisor, Colonel Yuri Krylov, listened to the calls coming in on the open radio circuits, including phantom targets, multiple bearings, which the radar crew near Kirkuk shouted. But when they looked up, there was nothing in the sky, only a faint exhaust shimmer at 30,000 feet. 8,000 kilometers away, in Nevada, the strike coordinator at Nellis Air Force Base monitored the same mission in complete silence because each F-117 pinged a coded signal every 90 seconds, including position, altitude, and bomb status, with no radio talk, no radar locks, just a green blip that said, "Still alive." Within 9 minutes of dropping their first bombs, the F-111s reached their exit point south of Baghdad, and not one was hit, not one was even seen. Consequently, by the time the second wave of conventional bombers arrived, Iraq's radar was hash. The vanishing was literal. It could be measured, and American analysts later estimated that more than 60% of Iraq's radar coverage was gone in the first hour, because mobile sites tried to crank up, only to be tracked down by AGM-88 HARM missiles fired by F-4G Wild Weasels, following the stealth jets, which killed a transmitter in a magnesium white flash each time. On the streets, civilians watched anti-aircraft tracers scrape blindly at the sky, chasing specters. However, Baghdad was a stage with no actors. Therefore, this was how the machine war heralded its arrival, not with the thunder of armies, but with absence. On the morning of January 17th, 1991, the war Iraq's generals thought would take months was already over, and in the next 72 hours, US air power would deconstruct an army of nearly 1 million men with near-surgical precision. The coalition called it Operation Desert Storm, but journalists would later dub it the 100-hour war, and across the Kuwaiti border, satellites beamed back infrared images of burning radar trucks and deserted trenches, because what Iraqi radar couldn't see, GPS could. For the first time, armored columns traversed a blank desert, not by the stars or compass, but by coordinates beamed down from 22 satellites, and American tank crews would joke that the sky had joined the army. The first orders given to the Republican Guards Tawakalna and Medina divisions, since the blackout, at 4 a.m. February. 24 were to hold position and await instructions to counterattack. However, none came because communications between Baghdad and the front were cut. What did move were hundreds of blips on the screens of coalition headquarters: Abrams tanks, Bradleys, MLR's batteries sweeping in clean arcs across the sand, and by the time the ground war began on February 24, the Guard had been bombed for 5 weeks. Consequently, their vaunted T-72s sat half buried in dunes, turrets ripped off by depleted uranium rounds from M1A1 Abrams that shot farther and faster than anything Iraq could field. Many Iraqi crews never even saw what hit them. Moreover, the Iraqis were caught off guard, and their lack of visibility was a significant factor in their defeat. On the second day of the war, reconnaissance aircraft captured a surreal sight: entire Iraqi armoured brigades abandoned in their tracks, their engines still running, and pilots returning from combat told stories of rows of machines waiting for masters who never showed up. In a matter of hours, the fourth largest army in the world did not just falter, it evaporated, erased by technology more than attrition. Therefore, the last intercepted transmission from an Iraqi division commander to his general staff before the ceasefire best expressed the fear that gripped Iraq's forces. We can neither see nor strike them. They come from nowhere. By day 4 of the war, American commanders were using a term that no one had ever heard before: digital battlespace. Because every movement, from a Humvee convoy to the precise moment of release of a stealth bomber's payload, was monitored in real time on glowing CRT screens inside Saudi command bunkers. The battlefield was no longer a map, but a network, and the effect was almost supernatural on the ground. Consequently, convoys that should have taken days to cross the open desert were making the journey in hours, guided by chunky, handheld GPS units, while pilots stopped looking for landmarks and followed laser dots painted by aircraft no one could see. For the first time, war was run on code, and the blackout was biblical, with reporters in Baghdad writing of a city flickering between darkness and fire, as power plants were struck but not destroyed, and bridges were cut but still standing enough for the cameras to film it. Meanwhile, CNN went live from the Al Rashid Hotel as explosions stitched light across the skyline. The cruel joke was that the world could see Baghdad more clearly than its own defenders could. However, at the Pentagon, the speed left planners stunned, because Schwarzkopf's staff later calculated that US aircraft flew more sorties in a single day than in any single campaign of World War II. The new doctrine had taken shape without anyone having given it a name, which was essentially shock through invisibility, because technology was not just a force multiplier, but a time eraser. Therefore, when the ceasefire came on 28 February 1991, the Iraqi army still existed on paper by the hundreds of thousands, although on screens it didn't exist at all, with radar returns showing 0 and communications intercepts being silence. The elite divisions that had once guarded Saddam had literally vanished from the picture, and as a result, historians would later claim that modern war was born during those days. But for the people standing on the rooftops of Baghdad, in the dark, it felt older than that, because it was the night humanity discovered that machines could hunt in the dark.